Hi, I'm Mario, and this video is one video in a series where I install a lithium battery bank in my Chevy Colorado. The goals in this video are to prepare and mount the accessories to the exterior of my battery box. So in essence, what I'm talking about is mounting the power inverter, mounting the MPPT charge controller, mounting the fuse blocks, those sorts of things, all of those things that will reside on the exterior of my battery box. And then also what I hope to do is actually locate and mount the entire assembly inside of the pickup truck. One component of the box that I'm not going to implement right away is a lid. The reason being is I don't fully understand how much ventilation is going to be necessary, and so I imagine something with some slots in it or something along those lines. But at any rate, I'm going to cross that bridge at a later date, and so that leaves us with this final component here, the fourth side, and I'm going to mount this using 6 wood screws coming in from the side. I'm not going to use any fasteners from the base upwards. And the reason being is I want this to be accessible so that this would be a serviceable bay. I could remove the 6 fasteners from the passenger side and gain easy access to the box, to the inside of the box. On the sides of the battery box, I am going to mount various components, i.e. an inverter, bus bars, fuse blocks, etc. So what I've done is I've laid out where I believe these things will reside and where I have room to place things. And I've labeled those locations with blue painter's tape. So I think I've done enough planning at this stage where I'm just about ready to place this into the vehicle. For these number 6 wood screws, I'm going to go ahead and use a 3/32 bit to bore out a pilot hole, but I'm also going to use a 7/64 bit to make these holes on the actual side panel a little bit larger. I don't want the threads to get mismatched as I torque it in. So I went ahead and I delineated 3/4 of an inch to represent the width of the walls. And then from here I can just eyeball out the pilots. And then I don't want to get too low. When I get towards the bottom, I don't want to go so close to the bottom that I don't have room for my drill. From here I'll move out to the 3/32 and go ahead and sink a couple of the screws. I want to make sure that there's no material left in there. Go ahead and bore that out. I'll go ahead and drive my number 6 screw. I think I'm using 1.25 inches. I can just feel the tips and I can get that lined up. So I haven't counterbored it yet. This upper corner is going to pull in a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and get a screw here and then I'll finish the counterboring. My battery box does not currently have a lid. I anticipate installing a lid, but I'm just going to cross that bridge later. And in anticipation of using a lid, I'm going to need a couple of breaches for the positive and negative battery cables. With that in mind, I think the first thing I want to do is go ahead and drill out those holes. To help me visualize, I went ahead and placed a couple of my circuit breakers onto the board here where I'm going to drill the hole. I need 2 additional holes, one towards the rear of the battery box where the power inverter is going to be mounted, and then also another one on the side to access the ground. I get a sense that coming in from the side here isn't going to be as much fun. On this one, I'm going to go a little bit larger. I have a 1-inch Forstner bit. All right, that was not easy. One thing I've noticed about these HDPE boards is they are not consistent. So I found some really dense parts and then others not so dense. Just something, food for thought. All right, I'm ready to start mounting some of these components onto the exterior of the battery box. And I'm going to start on this inboard facing side of the box. There's not much going on here. Basically, I got my fuse block for the positive battery power, and then I got a small ground bar. This is to help with the circuits coming off of this fuse block here. And then I have a main ground bus bar that will be part of my chassis ground. To mount these, I'm going to go ahead and use a number 8 self-drilling screw with a hex head, and it's got a little flange, little washer flange. And I'm going to go ahead and use a 7/64 drill bit to get things started. I just want to get some of that material out of the way, even though these are self-tapping. I want this main ground bar relatively low. I think what I'm going to do is just start by drilling the pilot. So on this one inboard side, I essentially have a power distribution module set up over here. Then I'll just need to feed positive power across here, and I'm going to put an A&L fuse here, so I'll have a 100 amp service on that fuse block. So that'll go here, the A&L fuse block, and then also my 2000 watt inverter. This will be facing towards the back of the vehicle, and there we something like this. Two of the three sides that are going to have accessories mounted are complete, and now I have this third side, which in essence is going to be a removable panel. So the passenger door is going to be here, so if I was opening the passenger door, I'd be facing inward here. All right, so at any rate, what I'm getting at here is I'm going to have 2 circuit breakers and the DC to DC charger. When I want to use solar panels to charge the batteries, I'll need another circuit breaker, and so I want to plan for some sort of expansion at any rate, but let's get going. So according to the labels that I've placed here, I'm going to have the DC to DC charger oriented about there. I'm going to have 1 circuit breaker here and another circuit breaker here. So in essence, something like that. So on the circuit breakers, I have a 60 and a 70 amp, and Renogy recommends a 75 amp from the alternator and a 65 amp out to the battery. So if need be, I'll go ahead and I'll do a 70 and a 80, I'll up it, but honestly it shouldn't, these 60s and 70s should work just fine. If I have to go bigger on the circuit breaker, well, first I'll want to know why I need to go bigger, but it won't be an issue because the cable sizes that I'm using will be adequate. So start with this 70 amp breaker coming in from the alternator. All right, so essentially it's going to look something like that. So I have the wire from the alternator is going to come into here, and then I'm going to connect this to here, and then I'm also going to connect the positive out is going to come down and over to here, and then this will go up and into the battery. On the reverse side of this panel, I'm going to mount an A&L fuse block. So that'll be a 200 amp fuse for the power inverter. The inverter actually calls for a 250 amp fuse. I didn't have access to any 250 amp fuses, but I can change out the different sizes. I'm going to start with a 200. The Battle-Born batteries aren't going to allow for greater than 200 amps anyway. So I'd like some sort of physical indicator whether or not I'm ever exceeding that. And anyway, I'm going to start with 200. And now that I'm looking at my charge controller mounted here, I should have started by mounting my A&L fuse block. I think I have the necessary components mounted so that I can get started. I can power some accessories, I can run the inverter, I don't know, maybe I can blow dry my hair, whatever. I think I got enough stuff to get started. So the next phase is going to be getting as much of the wiring done that I can before I mount this assembly inside the truck.